Beaumaris in the bayside suburbs of Melbourne has always been in a bit of an odd spot in terms of transport. A combination of being by the sea and on a headland has meant that getting transport lines to run through here has always been a challenge. So, when the Sandringham railway line was completed in 1887, some of the locals further east wanted a piece of the action and lobbied for it to be extended. But this was refused, and a horse-drawn tram built instead as a kind of consolation prize, operated by a private company with the permission of the Shire of Moorabbin. It was opened in sections, and by February 1889 it was operating between Cheltenham Station and Ricketts Point, and between Sandringham Station and Black Rock Corner. To cut a very long story short, the horse-drawn tramway gradually fell into disrepair and teetered on the edge of closure. In response to its imminent closure and the loss of the suburb's only rail link, by 1910 there were many public meetings and inquiries to examine the question of public transport in the area. Most settled on the original 1880s idea of extending the Sandringham line east to Black Rock or even further. The first two of many parliamentary committees reported in 1910 and 1913 respectively. The first one, commissioned by the new Minister for Railways, Alfred Bilson, recommended that the Sandringham line be extended to Bluff Road based on the predicted demand by holidaymakers and an increasing number of residents who wanted to live by the sea. However, this was contingent on the council guaranteeing to cover the estimated annual losses until the railway turned a profit. Also, because it was to be classified as a country railway, the land necessary to build it would need to be given over by the council and private landowners to the state government free of charge. This second condition eventually became the sticking point that halted any progress. Local residents didn't want to provide land for the railway without what they considered to be reasonable levels of compensation. But the estimated cost of this, about £21,100, made the project financially completely unviable, building a full double-track railway to only about 1,260 residents. The government refused to reclassify the railway as urban to allow for this compensation, and instead referred it again to the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Railways to figure out what to do next. They found that the increases in development and land values had raised the cost of acquiring the land for the railway to more than double that estimated in 1910, just over £50,000. An alternative route along the foreshore was proposed to reduce this cost, but this came with its own problems and wasn't seriously considered. Stuck between two options for a railway that had no realistic prospects of being built, the committee instead took a different tack. They eventually recommended that a 5.4-kilometre double-track electric tramway be built from Sandringham Station to Black Rock instead. Interestingly, one member of the committee, Donald Melville, voted against the recommendation because he wanted the tramway to start further north at Brighton Beach Station instead. The reason for this is not mentioned. This time the proposal was generally welcomed by the local residents and councils, except for some local opponents who were concerned about creating traffic congestion. And so construction was authorised by Parliament in 1914. The horse-drawn tram finally stopped operating in 1915, but by 1919 the new double-track electric tramway had been built and was operating, but only between Sandringham and Black Rock. There had been delays caused by a lack of electricity and the increased price and scarcity of building materials due to the outbreak of the First World War. Following relatively successful initial operations, the tram was then extended to Beaumaris in 1926 after yet more parliamentary committee reports and public petitions. This section from Black Rock to Beaumaris was single track with passing loops to save money, and extended southeast from Black Rock along Ebden Avenue, 4th Street, Haydens Road, Pacific Boulevard and Reserve Road before terminating at Martin Street near Port Phillip Bay. At this time, Beaumaris was sparsely developed, and many questioned the viability of this infrastructure. Even the Victorian Railways, who built and operated the tram, refused to go ahead with the extension until they had a guarantee of £2,000 from Sandringham Council to cover their expected operating losses for the first 5 years. Unfortunately though for the Victorian Railways, their losses were far more than this guarantee was to cover. They lost £18,500 just in the first 4 years, or about $2 million today, so the extension was closed in 1931. But I clicked on this video to hear about a railway and not a tram, I hear you say. Well, patience dear viewer, as we are just about to get to that. And while you're patiently waiting, why not subscribe? Every bit helps to support this channel and keep it going. So after years of neglect, the electric tram 2 was closed in November 1956, despite the strong protests of locals. It was perhaps this agitation by the good citizens of Beaumaris that motivated the government to once again resurrect the idea of putting a railway through. The State Development Committee published a report recommending that this and several new electric railway extensions be built in 1951. This new idea was different to the original proposal to extend the Sandringham line east. Instead, there would be a new railway built from the north, coming off the Frankston line at Moorabbin Station. The track would branch off the main line between Moorabbin and Hyatt stations, just north of Wickham Road, and curve towards the southwest. Then it would straighten at Hyatt Road to head due south across Bay Road through the present-day light industrial and commercial area. It would continue south around Cheltenham Memorial Park and through some golf courses, before meandering slightly to meet Balcombe Road near Hayden's Road, before finally terminating at the main Beaumaris shops on Reserve Road. The line would have had 4 stations at Bay Road, Cheltenham Road, Balcombe Road and Reserve Road. At the time it looked quite promising, and land was even reserved in the 1954 Metropolitan Planning Scheme and kept into the 1956 scheme, although the route was changed. This diverted around what is today part of the western section of the Cheltenham Memorial Park, possibly due to the new route requiring fewer houses to be demolished and allow the cemetery more room to expand. But also in 1959, the plan was rejected by the Railway Commissioners due to the cost of construction, the lack of rolling stock and projected low patronage. Instead, they suggested feeder buses to the Frankston and Sandringham lines. This didn't stop Beaumaris residents who mounted a campaign to at least preserve the rail corridor for a future railway. A petition of 3,232 people was presented to the government in 1961, but to no avail. And so the Beaumaris Railway, together with those to East Preston, Mornington and others, were officially cancelled in 1962 when the land reservations were removed from the planning scheme. Any land that it had acquired was sold or used for schools or other public facilities. And so that spelled the end of a railway to Beaumaris with no formal proposals since. Now it's unclear to me how serious these plans actually were. It may have just been a huge ruse to help placate the local angst felt at the removal of their tram, or they may have actually intended to build it at some point, I'm not really sure. There is only some evidence on the ground that this railway was ever even considered. You can see this in a couple of street alignments around Balcombe Road, just west of Reserve Road, and the western boundary of Beaumaris Secondary College on Gareth Avenue and Balcombe Park Drive. Both are on an angle, out of kilter with the surrounding, mainly grid, street network. And this was where the railway was supposed to run. There are also some other small clues. For example, the people living in these houses near the proposed junction with the Frankston line near Hyatt have probably wondered why their driveways are not nice and straight like those of their neighbours. This is actually because they were built on the land that was later sold when the railway was canned. You can follow part of the alignment yourself and walk down some streets that, in an alternative universe, would have instead carried trains. Even if this railway had been built, I'm pretty sure it would have suffered the same fate as the electric and horse-drawn trams that came before it anyway. Beaumaris is not an area of high population growth, and if a line wasn't financially viable in the 1950s, I doubt it would have survived the Loney Report in 1980. Having said that, maybe the agitating from local residents would have kept it open, operating as a shuttle or something like the Alamein line, but I guess we'll never know. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this and would like to see more, please subscribe to the channel so that you can stay up to date on future videos. Also, please consider signing up to my supporters portal over at members.philipmallis.com. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.